buying and selling whiskey or blending whiskey, it's a useful tool to have. And as Sam says, it was nothing to do with me, but it was the genius of a guy called Mike Collings and Roy McMillan who created the classic malts. Boy, that really made malts a lot more comprehensible for so many people. Tastes like this because it comes from Speyside, or it tastes like this because it comes from the lowlands. Simple. It's just like, and in fact, Mike Collings, who was the principal person behind this, had worked on wine, and he knew how simplifying wine had made it far more accessible to people, and that's what they were trying to do with the classic malts. Yeah.
I mean, one question that I did miss, so I'm sorry about this, we're just going to jump back again to the Brora and the Port Ellen. So Christoph was asking, are they basically being opened because possibly of the second-hand market prices, or was it a more detailed decision to open them?
Well, it's not detailed. I mean, it wasn't a decision that was taken lightly, because it's a big investment to bring a distillery back from the dead and then to sit around for 10 years or so waiting for the stock to mature before you start really making any money out of it. So it's a very detailed and thought-led decision.
Nick, I can't remember. Did we have a safe word if you want us to rescue you from any questions from Soren?
No, it's all right. Sam, I'll...
Do we need to stop recording before you answer that question?
No, it's fine. It's fine. So it was a very well thought out decision, and obviously it was based on the perceived value that these whiskies have got there out in the open market. And it's no secret that obviously the stocks of Brora and Port Ellen that Diageo has are diminishing year on year. So it was sort of, well, are we just going to milk this cow, or are we going to make the herd bigger? What a metaphor. That's not very good, is it? So
that's not how you make a herd bigger.
The only good immunity I care about.
we went for more cows. That was what we did in the end.
Yeah, then you need more draft to feed those happy cows.
More draft.
Yeah, and then we need more farmers to get rid of the shit.
Yeah.
But I mean, Claire's got an interesting one. Do you want to ask it, Claire?
Which one? One or two?
Oh, number one. I ain't got to number two.
Okay, so yeah, I suppose it's for all three of you. Is there a correlation in history between how people drank their whiskey compared to the economic climate of the time? I.e., right now it's very much we're all drinking whiskey neat because we're all a little bit more well off. Previously we would have had toddies and highballs and stuff when we may not be as well off. Is that a thing that's gone through history of whiskey, or?
Well, I think on the it's an interesting question, but I think on the toddy side, for example, lemons and sugar were not cheap. Lemons and sugar were not cheap.
Especially sugar coming from the Dutch houses and stuff like that.
So this is and that's what we were saying when Sam made the point earlier. This is sort of middle class, well off drinking, and I think if you're having bottles of soda water at home, or of course classically you're in gentlemen's clubs drinking whiskey and soda and all that nonsense, then that's quite. I mean, the sort of whiskies we're talking about have always been quite luxurious, really. Always been quite luxurious. And
so it's interesting how we now look at drinking a highball or a toddy as slightly lower level than drinking it neat now.
Dave doesn't think of it
how
like that.
How the class has changed as such around whiskey.
That's a really fascinating insight. I would agree with that. And yes, Shane, you're absolutely right, Nick, about the expense of lemons and stuff. You got these wonderful accounts in the 18th century of travellers from the south heading up into the Highlands and having bags of lemons flung around the necks of their horses, so that punch could be made. And it might be whiskey punch, could be rum punch, could be something else. And also intriguing references within other accounts of rowan berries being used as the acidulant because there are no lemons. But again, this isn't the drink of the common people. When it's been drunken in this particular way. And actually what you do see, and this kind of is something that Arthur and I are kind of looking at as well, there's no great accounts of misuse of alcohol, of heavy drinking taking place. spirit would be taken, but it wouldn't be taken in excess. And I'm meaning in kind of farming communities, working class communities. You know, it would be the odd dram, you know, as a heart starter, or maybe for celebrations. And even talking to old guys, you know, talking to Pinky on Isla about his dad and how his dad and his granddad drank whiskey. Maybe at New Year, maybe in times of celebration. So, yeah, this idea of the kind of hard drinking Scotsman, not necessarily always the case, but yeah, I think that's a fascinating way of the way in which things have flipped.
Yeah, they've swapped over.
That's great. I did, before we jump in, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to jump off because I've got a family thing coming up in about 4 minutes' time.
Well, we'll just give you for 3.5 then. I mean, the interesting thing there is the fact that the lemons were the expensive thing rather than the whiskey. And now you look at the other way around, and it's the whiskey, you know, and the lemons are pittance, basically.
Yeah, but
Just wait until we get our Brexit.
Yeah, but even, you know, I was chatting with Ronnie Cox the other day, and so looking at the price of a bottle of whiskey in, like, in the 1960s, 1970s, it was a really expensive item to buy. And whiskey, you know, it was a week's wages, or, you know, it was a lot of money to actually invest in a bottle of whiskey. So, you know, that has shifted as well. And, you know, that's one great advantage of having an archive and having people like Nick, you know, beginning to kind of pick through these things and going, actually, you know, this history, this kind of approved history that we've been told is actually a lot more subtle and a lot more complex than perhaps we've always been led to believe.
And that increase in the price of whiskey, of course, is very much really a 20th century phenomenon. So whiskey is almost stable price through a lot of the later part of the 19th century, and it really starts going up in price after the 1909 budget, and then the First World War and recession, Second World War. I mean, the price of whiskey in the UK market, it's astonishing. I mean, it must have been more than a week's wages, easily more than a week's wages.
Yep. Well, what I'll do now is, because obviously I'm aware that Dave needs to go, so I'll let you go now then, Dave, and just say massive thank you for coming on. It's been fantastic listening to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I've really enjoyed it, guys, and sorry I have to.
No, we appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate the time you've given us. So thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Cheers, guys. Nick, see you
soon.
Take care.
But yeah, I mean, sort of going on that, Nick, you know, it is interesting, like you say, that the prices have been fluctuating, but, you know, we look at whiskey now and there's some very good cheap whiskies, but obviously the top end is continuing to rise.
Yeah, sorry, I've just found my price of whiskey piece of paper. So if you want to know, it was sort of three shillings or 3 and 6 a bottle up until the 1909 budget. And actually, we're talking about a bottle of sort of standard blended whiskey, like a bottle of Johnny Walker Red Label, for example. And it went up from 3 and 6pence to 33 shillings and 4pence in the space of 30 odd years. Wow. So that just tells you, you know, how expensive whiskey became.
But does that go back to Claire's question, though? Some of that taxation rooted in trying to keep it out of the drinking halls of the poorer parts of society?
No. It's governments just trying to make money, Sam. It's not. There's no. I mean, it was felt that the Lloyd George budget had a temperance aspect to it, but after that, it's taken out of their hands because of the pressures of war and Great Recession and stuff. Yeah.
Do you want to ask your second question? Because it kind of does come into this.
Yeah, it's a shame Dave's disappeared.
Yeah,
My second question was going to be, if you could choose a point in time, whether past, present or future, to go and drink whiskey, where would you go and why?
To the beginning of Port Ellen. We'll put that one to Sam while Nick has a think about it.
Looks like Sam's thinking hard as well.
I think about time machines all the time. God, the fun I would have. Never mind whiskey.
I mean, does any period in time actually excite you more, though, Sam?
Really, Yeah, the ability to get great I would say even 10 years before I got into whiskey, between 1992 and 2002 was a great time to be into whiskey and putting whiskeys aside, to have the foresight in Canada, where I'm from, or even in Scotland when I lived there. Right when I got there, if I had any expendable income, God, it would have been wonderful. You know, the kind of whiskeys I could have tried back then that I can't even approach now, even because of the costs. But no, maybe Italy in the 70s. So you're getting overage stocks of some of the sexiest stuff in the world. You're the only people getting independent bottlings. Really, you're getting, you know, I know I'm coming. I gotta go.
I mean, an interesting thing to put into this then, Sam, is we all talk about whiskies from the 60s and 70s. Do you think people in 20, 30 years will be talking about whiskey from now?
Well, it relates, I think, to a kind of what you were saying earlier, but you were saying, sorry, about prices going up. I was looking recently to try and justify some of our prices because we have different partners around the world who want it to be more expensive, who want it to be cheaper, different products in our range, for example. And I'm stand by the fact that something that I've been arguing for probably a decade, that there are better whiskeys under 50 pounds than there ever have been. We are so, and I know 50 pounds is a lot of money for a lot of people. I'm not dismissing that at all. But to be able to get the quality of spirit under 50 pounds that we have today is, I don't think there's been that sort of selection ever before.
Yeah. So is that a precursor to all boutique bottles are going to be coming under 50 pound now?
Well, you guys, if anyone knows, you guys know, some of them are properly priced to move. Some can't be because we paid too much for them during a crazy buying period when I first started. But I think the idea is whiskey is to be shared and enjoyed. So what's the harm? It's safer to circulate it, because I also agree with Dave to a certain degree that we do have a whiskey law coming.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think then, Nick? Is there any period in time that you would rather be in to drink whiskey, or are you quite happy where we are?
I'm always a person of the moment, actually, and whilst I love the past, I don't subscribe to sort of golden age myth that many people want to deeply believe in. And you know, I just build on what Sam says, and I just talk from the whiskies that I know really well, which are ones that Diageo makes. But if you can buy a bottle of Talisker 10-year-old or a bottle of Kleinleach 14-year-old for less than 50 quid and sit and enjoy that, I mean, the world's a good place as far as I'm concerned, with whiskies like that around.
And you can definitely get a Talisker 10 for sub 50.
How are you for time, Sam? Do you need to get off? Yeah.
Yeah.